Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Welcome into Bryant and Inochi, Frankie, Jacob, and Gray. You like reading. This one, if you like reading, you've come into a good spot because we have one story and then we get to the Telltale Heart, which I know is one that lots of people know and love, and we're going to be able to get to it. I'm hoping to get through 3 stories, but the one after Telltale Heart is called The Gold Bug, and it's on the lengthier side, and it's got some really weird, almost like ciphers, and I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to read those out, but I will try my best. But you read that in college? Yes. Moves Frankie to a safe location as you glitch to the 4th dimension. You're trying your best, Gray. You're trying your best. But Frankie is also an immortal bag being, so I don't know how successful you're going to be. All right, I have a full mug of water. I have a full mug of water. Please pay attention to the rules. I will not be able to respond to everybody while I am reading, but during breaks, hopefully I can interject some things. This one is pretty short to start with. It is called, as I butcher it, because it is, well, it sounds like the name of a town that belongs in Wisconsin, and I'm terrible at pronouncing those. But we have Morning on the Wissahickon. Wissahickon. And unlike a lot of the stories before, we do not have a preface, so it goes just right into it. The natural scenery of America has often been contrasted in its general features as well as in detail with the landscape of the Old World, more especially of Europe, and not deeper has been the enthusiasm than wide the dissension of the supporters of each region. The discussion is one not likely to be soon closed, for, although much has been said on both sides, a world yet more remains to be said. The most conspicuous of the British tourists who have attempted a comparison seem to regard our northern and eastern seaboard, comparatively speaking, as all of America, at least as all of the United States worthy consideration. They say little, because they have seen less, of the gorgeous interior scenery of some of our western and southern districts. Of the vast valley of Louisiana, for example, a realization of the wildest dreams of paradise. For the most part, these travelers content themselves with a hasty inspection of the natural lions of the land, the Hudson, Niagara, the Catskills, Harper's Ferry, the lakes of New York, the Ohio, the prairies, and the Mississippi. These indeed are objects well worthy of the contemplation even of him who has clambered the Castelled Rhine, or roamed by the rushing blue of the airy Rhone. But these are not all of what we can boast, and indeed I would be so hardy as to assert that there are innumerable quiet, obscure, and scarcely observed nooks within the limits of the United States that by the true artist or cultivated lover of the grand and beautiful amid the works of God will be preferred to each and to all of the chronicled and better accredited scenes to which I have referred. In fact, the real Edens of the land lie far away from the track of our own most deliberate tourists. How very far, then, beyond the reach of the foreigner who, having made, with his publisher at home, arrangements for a certain amount of comment upon America, to be furnished in a stipulated period, can hope to fulfill his agreement in no other manner than by steaming it, memorandum book in hand, through only the most beaten thoroughfares of the country. I mentioned just above the Valley of Louisiana. Of all extensive areas of natural loveliness, this is perhaps the most lovely. No fiction has approached it. The most gorgeous imagination might derive suggestions from its exuberant beauty, and beauty is, indeed, its sole character. It has little or rather nothing of the sublime. Gentle undulations of soil interwreathed with fantastic crystalline streams, banked by flowery slopes and backed by a forest vegetation, gigantic, glossy, multicolored, sparkling with gay birds and burdened with perfume. These features make up, in the Vale of Louisiana, the most voluptuous natural scenery upon earth. But even in this delicious region, the sweeter portions are reached only by the bypaths. Indeed, in America generally, the traveler who would behold the finest landscapes must seek them not by the railroad, nor by the steamboat, not by the stagecoach, nor in his private carriage, not yet even on horseback, but on foot. He must walk. He must leap ravines, he must risk his neck among precipices, or he must leave the unseen the truest, the richest, and most unspeakable glories of the land. Now, in the greater portion of Europe, no such necessity exists. In England, it exists not at all. The merest dandy of a tourist may there visit every nook worth visiting without detriment to his silk stockings. So thoroughly known are all points of interest, and so well arranged are the means of attaining them. This consideration has never been allowed its due weight in comparisons of the natural scenery of the Old and New Worlds. The entire loveliness of the former is collated with only the most noted, and with by no means the most eminent items in the general loveliness of the latter. River scenery has unquestionably within itself all the main elements of beauty, and, time out of mind, has been the most favorite theme of the poet. But most of this fame is attributable to the predominance of travel in fluvial over that mountainous district. In the same way, large rivers, because usually highways, have, in all countries, absorbed an undue share of admiration. They are more observed and consequently made more of the subject of discourse than less important, but often more interesting streams. Water. A singular exemplification of my remarks upon this head may be found in the Wissahickon. We'll go with that. A brook, for more it can scarcely be called, which empties itself into the Schuylkill, about 6 miles westward of Philadelphia. Now, the Wissahickon is so remarkable a loveliness that were it flowing in England, it would be the theme of every bard, and the common topic of every tongue, if indeed its banks were not parceled off in lots at an exorbitant price, as building sites for the villas of the opulent. Yet it is only within a few years that anyone has more than heard of the Wissahickon. Well, the broader and more navigable water into which it flows has long been celebrated as one of the finest specimens of American river scenery. The Schuylkill, whose beauties have been exaggerated, and whose banks in the neighborhoods of Philadelphia are marshy like those of the Delaware, is not at all comparable, an object of picturesque interest with the more humble and less notorious rivulet of which we speak. It was not until Fanny Kemble, in her droll book about the United States, pointed out to the Philadelphians the rare loveliness of a stream which lay at their own doors, that this loveliness was more than suspected by a few adventurous pedestrians of the vicinity. But the journal, having opened all eyes, the Wissahickon, to a certain extent, rolled at once into notoriety. I say to a certain extent, for, in fact, the true beauty of the stream lies far above the route of the Philadelphia picturesque hunters, who rarely proceed farther than a mile or two above the mouth of the rivulet, for the very excellent reason that here the carriage road stops. I would advise the adventurer who would behold its finest points to take the Ridge Road, running westwardly from the city, and having reached the second lane beyond the 6th milestone, to follow this lane to its termination. He will thus strike the Wissahickon at one of its best reaches, and in a skiff or by clambering along its banks he can go up or down the stream as best suits his fancy, and in either direction will meet his reward. I have already said, or should have said, that the brook is narrow. Its banks are generally, indeed almost universally, precipitous, and consist of high hills clothed with noble shrubbery near the water, and crowned at a greater elevation with some of the most magnificent forest trees of America, among which stands conspicuous the Liriodendron tulipiferum. The immediate shores, however, are of granite, sharply defined or moss-covered, against which the pellucid water lolls in its gentle flow, and as the blue waves of the Mediterranean upon the steps of her palaces of marble. Occasionally, in front of the cliffs extends a small definite plateau of richly herbaged land, affording the most picturesque position for a cottage and garden, which the richest imagination could conceive. The windings of the stream are many and abrupt, and as is usually the case where banks are precipitous, and thus the impression conveyed to the voyager's eye as he proceeds is that of an endless succession of infinitely varied small lakes, or more properly speaking, tarns. The Wissahickon, however, should be visited, not like fair Melrose by moonlight or even in cloudy weather, but amidst the bright glare of the noonday sun, for the narrowness of the gorge through which it flows, the height of the hills on either hand, and the density of the foliage conspire to produce a gloominess, if not an absolute dreariness of effect, which, unless relieved by a bright general light, detracts from the mere beauty of the scene. Not long ago, I visited the stream by the route described and spent the better part of a sultry day in floating in a skiff upon its bosom. The heat gradually overcame me, and resigning myself to the influence of the scenes and of the weather, and of the gentle moving current, I sank into a half-slumber, during which my imagination reveled in visions of the Wissahickon of ancient days, of the good old days when the demon of the engine was not, when picnics were undreamed of, when water privileges were neither bought nor sold, and when the red man trod alone with the elk upon the ridges that now towered above. And while gradually these conceits took possession of my mind, the lazy brook had borne me inch by inch around one premonitory and within full view of another that bounded prospect at the distance of 40 or 50 yards. It was a steep rocky cliff abutting far into the stream and presenting much of the Salvador character than any portion of the shore hitherto passed. What I saw upon this cliff, although surely an object of very extraordinary nature, the place and season considered, at first neither startled nor amazed me. So thoroughly and appropriately did it chime in with the half-slumberous fancies that enwrapped me. I saw, or dreamed I saw, standing upon the extreme verge of the precipice with neck outstretched, with ears erect, and with the whole attitude indicative of profound and melancholy inquisitiveness, one of the boldest and oldest of those identical elks which had been coupled with the red men of my vision. I say that for a few moments this apparition neither startled nor amazed me. During this interval my whole soul was bound up in intense sympathy alone. I fancied the elk repining, not less than wondering at the manifest alterations for the worst wrought upon the brook and its vicinage, even within the last few years by the stern hand of the utilitarian. But a slight movement of the animal's head at once dispelled the dreaminess which invested me and aroused me to a full sense of novelty of the adventure. I arose upon one knee within the skiff, and while I hesitated whether to stop my career or let myself float nearer to the object of my wonder, I heard the words, "Hist! Hist!" ejaculated quickly but cautiously from the shrubbery overhead. In an instant afterwards, a man emerged from the thicket, putting aside the bushes with care and treading stealthily. He bore in one hand a quantity of salt, and, holding it toward the elk, gently yet steadily approached. The noble animal, although a little flustered, made no attempt to escape. The man advanced, offered the salt, and spoke a few words of encouragement or conciliation. Presently the elk bowed and stamped, and then lay quietly, and was secured with a halter. Thus ended my romance of the elk. It was a pet of great age and very domestic habits, and belonged to an English family occupying a villa in the vicinity. Oh, we've ended our dry spell of the E word. Delightful. Welcome in, Dancy and Thaddeus. Hello. We also got a bosom and erect and aroused. Wow. Edgar Allan Poe and I are spoiling you today. The universe is healing. Oh gosh, so silly. All right. Well then, with that, we begin The Telltale Heart. There is also not a preface to this one, so we just get to go right into it. The Telltale Heart. telltale heart, and I will attempt to say it correctly. The telltale heart. True. Nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and by so degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him, and every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he has passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night just at 12 I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than mine did. Never before the night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. Sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were fastened, though through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle. And in the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief, oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he has been trying to comfort himself with all these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain. Because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time very patiently without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at last a single dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot out from the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open. Wide, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with a perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct precisely upon the damned spot. And now have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could to maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and louder every instant. The man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some moments longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once. Only once. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited it all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been disputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerfully, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale, and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness until at length I found the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale. But I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such as a sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh, God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting, and it grated upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, oh, no, no. They heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think, but anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die, and now again. Hark, louder, 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 louder! Villains, I shrieked, dissemble no more. I admit the deed, tear up the planks. Here, it is the beating of his hideous heart. Well, that was a trip. That one's fun to read. Holy crap. I wasn't prepared. I remembered it vaguely, but I didn't remember the raving at the end. Raucous applause. Thank you. That was awesome. You're gonna make me blush. You stop that. I like acting. What can I say? All right. We can get through some of the gold bug. We're not going to get through all of the gold bug. I'd like to stop around 9, but about in a half an hour or so. Chills. I don't even know how to finish that. Like, it feels wrong to read another one after that, honestly, but we'll do it. All right. Next, we've got, after another sip of water, even more clapping. Stop. Stop. All right. We have the gold bug. I feel like this is accurate. So we do have a preface this time. What ho, this fellow is dancing mad. He hath been bitten by the tarantula. All in the wrong. Many years ago, I contracted an intimacy with a Mr. William Legrand. He was of an ancient Huguenot family, and had once been wealthy, but a series of misfortunes had reduced him to want. To avoid the mortification consequent upon his disasters, he left New Orleans, the city of his forefathers, and took up his residence at Sullivan's Island near Charleston, South Carolina. This island is a very singular one. It consists of little else than the sea sand and is about 3 miles long. Its breadth at no point exceeds 1/4 of a mile. It is separated from the mainland by a scarcely perceptible creek oozing its way through a wilderness of reeds and slime, a favorite resort of the marsh hen. The vegetation, as might be supposed, is scant, or at least dwarfish. No trees of any magnitude are to be seen. Near the western extremity, where Fort Moultrie stands, and where are some miserable frame buildings, tenanted during summer by the fugitives from Charleston dust and fever, may be found, indeed, the bristly palmetto, but the whole island, with the exception of this western point and a line of hard white beach on the seacoast, is covered with a dense undergrowth of the sweet myrtle, so much prized by the horticulturists of England. The shrub here often attains the height of 15 or 20 feet and forms an almost impenetrable coppice, burdening the air with its fragrance. In the inmost recesses of this coppice, not far from the eastern or more remote end of the island, Legrand had built himself a small hut, which he occupied when I first, by mere accident, made his acquaintance. This soon ripened into friendship, for there was more in the recluse to excite interest and esteem. I found him well educated, with unusual powers of mind, but infected with misanthropy, and subject to perverse moods of alternate enthusiasm and melancholy. He had with him many books, but rarely employed them. His chief amusements were gunning and fishing and sauntering along the beach with the myrtles, and quest of shells or entomological specimens. His collection of the latter might have been envied by a Swammerdam. In these excursions he was usually accompanied by an old man named Jupiter, who had been manumitted before the reverses of the family, but who could be induced neither by threats nor by promises to abandon what he considered his right of attendance upon the footsteps of his young Master Will. I am not going to read that in the accent they want me to read it in, because that is inappropriate. They are also not using man for some of these words, which I will also not say. It is not improbable that the relatives of Legrand, convincing him to be somewhat unsettled in intellect, had contrived to instill this obstinacy into Jupiter, with a view to the supervision and guardianship to the wanderer. Yeah, I would like to just clarify. While I am not for censorship of literature, I also am not going to set myself up to be taken out of context, and yeah, there are just evil things that people can do if they so chose, if they decide to take anything out of context, and I'm not willing to do that to myself. So, we will continue. The winters in the latitude of Sullivan's Island are seldom very severe, and in the fall of the year it is a rare event when a fire is considered necessary. About the middle of October, 18 blank, there occurred, however, a day of remarkable chilliness. Just before sunset, I scrambled my way through the evergreens to the hut of my friend, whom I had not visited for several weeks, my residence being at the time in Charleston, a distance of 9 miles from the island, while the facilities of passage and repassage were very far behind those of the present day. Upon reaching the hut, I rapped, as was my custom, and getting no reply, sought for the key where I knew it was secreted, unlocked the door, and went in. A fine fire was blazing upon the hearth. It was a novelty, and by no means an ungrateful one. I threw off an overcoat, took an armchair by the crackling logs, and awaited patiently the arrival of my hosts. Soon after dark, they arrived and gave me a most cordial weapon. Welcome! Jupiter, grinning ear from ear, bustled about to prepare some marsh hens for supper. Legrand was in one of his fits, how else shall I term them, of enthusiasm. He had found an unknown bivalve forming a new genus, and, more than this, he had hunted down and secured, with Jupiter's assistance, a scarabaeus, which he believed to be totally new, but in respect to which he wished to have my opinion on the morrow. And why not tonight? I asked, rubbing my hands over the blaze and wishing the whole tribe of scarabaei at the devil. Ah, if only I had known you were here, said Legrand, but it's been so long since I saw you, and how could I foresee that you would pay me a visit this night of all others? It was as I was coming home, I met Lieutenant G. Blank from the fort, and very foolishly I lent him the bug, so it will be impossible for you to see it until the morning. Stay here tonight, and I will send Jupe down for it at sunrise. It is the loveliest thing in creation. What? Sunrise? Nonsense, no, the bug! It is of a brilliant gold color, about the size of a large hickory nut, with 2 jet black spots near one extremity of the back and another somewhat longer at the other. The antennae are I cannot read this again in the accent they want me to read it in, so I'm going to try to figure out the wording of what it should be. I'm trying to figure out how to do this tactfully. I'm so sorry. There isn't any tin in him, Master Will. I keep telling you that, here interrupted Jupiter. The bug is a gold bug, solid, every bit of him, inside and all. Except his wing. Never feel half... Oh, never felt so heavy a bug in my life. There we go. That's what they're trying to say. Well, suppose it is, Jupe, replied Legrand, somewhat more earnestly. It seemed to me than the case demanded. Is there any reason for you letting the birds to burn? The color, he turned to me, is almost enough to warrant Jupiter's idea. You never saw a more brilliant metallic luster that the scales emit. But here you cannot judge till tomorrow. In the meantime, I can give you some idea of the shape. Saying this, he seated himself at a small table on which were a pen and ink, but no paper. He searched for some in a drawer, but found none. Never mind, he said at length. This will answer. And he drew from his waistcoat pocket a scrap of what I took to be very dirty fool's cap, and made upon it a rough drawing with the pen. While he did this, I retained my seat by the fire, for I was still chilly. When the design was complete, he handed it to me without rising. As I received it, a large growl was heard, succeeded by a scratching at the door. Jupiter opened it, and a large Newfoundland belonging to Legrand rushed in, leapt upon my shoulders, and goaded me with caresses, for I had shown him much attention during previous visits. When his gambols were over, I looked at the paper, and to speak the truth, found myself not a little puzzled by what my friend had depicted. Well, I said after contemplating it for some minutes, this is a strange scarabaeus. I must confess, new to me, never saw anything like it before, unless it was a skull or a death's head, which more nearly resembles than anything else which has come under my observation. A death's head, echoed Legrand. Ah, yes, well, it has something of that appearance upon paper, no doubt. The 2 upper spots look like eyes, eh? And the longer one at the bottom like a mouth. And then the whole shape of it is oval. Perhaps so, said I, but Legrand, I fear you are no artist. I must wait until I see the beetle myself, if I am to form any idea of its personal appearance. Well, I don't know, said he, a little nettled. I draw tolerably. Should do it, at least. I've had good masters, and flatter myself that I am not quite a blockhead. But, my dear fellow, you are joking then, said I. This is a very passable skull. Indeed, I may say it is a very excellent skull, according to the vulgar notions about such specimens of physiology, and your scarabaeus must be the queerest scarabaeus in the world if it resembles it. Why, we may get up to a very thrilling bit of superstition upon this hint, but I presume you will call the bug Scarabaeus caput hominis or something of that kind. There are many similar titles in the natural history, but where are the antennae you spoke of? The antenna, said Legrand, who seemed to be getting unaccountably warm upon the subject. I am sure you must see the antenna. I made them as distinct as they are in the original insect, and I presume that is sufficient. Well, I said, perhaps you have. Still, I don't see them. And as I handed him the paper without additional remark, not wishing to ruffle his temper, but I was much surprised at the turn affairs had taken. His ill humor puzzled me, and as for the drawing of the beetle, there were positively no antennae visible, and the whole did bear a very close resemblance to the ordinary cuts of a death's head. He received the paper very peevishly and was about to crumple it, apparently throw it in the fire, when a casual glance at the design suddenly seemed to rivet his attention. In an instant, his face grew violently red, in another excessively pale. For some minutes he continued to scrutinize the drawing minutely where he sat. At length he arose, took a candle from the table, and proceeded to seat himself in a sea-chest on the furthest corner of the room. Here again he made an anxious examination of the paper, turning it in all directions. He said nothing, however, and his conduct greatly astonished me. Yet I thought it prudent not to exacerbate the growing moodiness of his temper by any comment. Presently he took from his coat pocket a wallet, placed the paper carefully in it, and deposited both in a writing desk, which he locked. He now grew more composed in his demeanor, but his original air of enthusiasm had quite disappeared. Yet he seemed not much more sulky, as abstracted. As the evening wore away, he became more and more absorbed in his reverie, from which no sallies of mine could arouse him. It had been my intention to pass the night at the hut, as I had frequently done before, but seeing my host in this mood, I deemed it proper to take leave. He did not press me to remain, but as I departed, he shook my hand with even more than his usual cordiality. It was about a month after this, and during the interval I had seen nothing of Legrand, when I received a visit at Charleston from his man Jupiter. I have never seen the good old man look so dispirited, and I feared that some serious disaster had befallen my friend. Well, Jupe, said I, what is the matter now? How is your master? Why, to speak the truth, master, he's not so very well as he ought to be. Not well? I'm truly sorry to hear it. What does he complain of? There, that's it. He never complains of anything of note, but he's very sick for all that. Very sick, Jupiter. Why didn't you say so at once? Is he confined to bed? No, that he isn't. He hasn't found he isn't. What? He isn't. Oh, he's not confined anywhere. That's just where I cannot translate this for the life of me. I am terribly sorry. I'm not sure what that line is supposed to be. My mind has got to be very heavy about poor Master Will. Jupiter, I should like to understand what it is you're talking about. You say your master is sick. Hasn't he told you what ails him? Why, master, it's nothing worthwhile for me to get mad about the matter. Master Will said nothing at all is the matter with him. But then what makes him go around looking this here way, with his head down and his shoulders up and as white as a goose? And then he keeps a siphon all the time. Oh, okay. Yeah, that is actually what it means. Keeps a what, Jupiter? Keeps a siphon with the figures on the slate. The queerest figures I ever did see. It's getting to be scared Scared? Scared! I'm starting to get scared, I tell you. Have to keep a mighty eye upon him. The other day, he gave me the slip before sunup and was gone the whole blessed day. I had a big steak ready cut to give him when he did come. But I'm such a fool that I hadn't the heart after all. He looked so very poorly. Ah? What? Ah, yes, upon the whole, I think you had better not be too severe with the poor fellow. Don't flog him, Jupiter. He can't very well stand it. But can you form no idea of what has occasioned him this illness, or rather this change of conduct? Has anything unpleasant happened since I saw you? No, master, there hasn't been anything unpleasant since then. It was before then, I feared. It was the very day you were there. How? What do you mean? Why, master, I mean the bug. There now. The what? The bug. Very certain that Master Will was bit somewhere around the head by that gold bug. And what cause have you, Jupiter, for such a supposition? Claws enough, master, and mouth too. Never did see such a deuced bug. He kicked and bit everything that came near him. Master Will caught him, but had to let him go. Mighty quick, I tell you. Then was the time he must have gotten bit. I didn't like the look of the bug myself. No, so that I would take a hold of him with my finger, but I caught him with a piece of paper that I found. I wrapped him up in the paper and stuffed a piece of it in his mouth. That was the way. And you think, then, that your master was really bitten by the beetle and that bite made him sick? I don't think nothing about it. I know it. What made him dream about the gold bug, about the gold so much? It wasn't that he was bitten by the gold bug. I've heard about those gold bugs before this. But how do you know he dreams about gold? How do I know? Why, 'cause he talks in his sleep about it. That's how I know. Well, perhaps you are right, but what fortunate circumstance am I to attribute the honor of a visit from you today? What's the matter, master? Did you bring any message from Mr. Legrand? No, master, I bring this here parcel. And here Jupiter handed me a note which ran thus. My dear, why have I not seen you for so long a time? I hope you have not been so foolish as to take offense at any little brusquerie of mine, but no, that is improbable. Since I saw you, I have had great cause for anxiety. I have something to tell you, yet scarcely know how to tell it, or whether I should tell it at all. I have not been quite well for some days past, and poor Jupe annoys me, almost beyond endurance by his well-meant intentions. Would you believe it? He had prepared a huge stick the other day, with which to chastise me for giving him the slip and spending the day solus among the hills of the mainland. I verily believe that my ill looks alone saved me a flogging. I have made no addition to my cabinet since we met. If you can in any way make it convenient, come over with Jupiter. Do come. I wish to see you tonight. Upon business of importance, I assure you it is of the highest importance. Ever yours, William Legrand. There was something in the tone of this note which gave me great uneasiness. Its whole style differed materially from that of Legrand. What could he be dreaming of? What new crotchet passed his excitable brain? What business of the highest importance could he possibly have to transact? Jupiter's account of him boded no good. I dreaded lest the continued pressure of my misfortune had at length fairly unsettled the reason of my friend. Without a moment's hesitation, therefore, I prepared to accompany the man. Upon reaching the wharf, I noticed a scythe and 3 spades, all apparently new, laying in the bottom of the boat in which we were about to embark. What is the meaning of all this, Jupe? I inquired. his scythe master and spade. Very true, but what are they doing here? His scythe and his spade that Master Will my buying him and the town and the devil's own lot of money I had to give for them. But what, in the name of all that is mysterious, is your Master Will going to do with scythes and spades? That's more than I know, and devil take me if I don't believe it's more than he knows too. But it's all 'cause of the bug. Finding that no satisfaction was to be obtained of Jupiter, whose whole intellect seemed to be absorbed by the bug, I now stepped into the boat and made sail. With a fair and strong breeze, we soon ran into the little cove to the northward of Fort Moultrie, and a walk of some 2 miles brought us to the hut. It was about 3 in the afternoon when we arrived. Legrand had been awaiting us in eager expectation. He grasped my hand with a nervous empressement, which alarmed me and strengthened the suspicions already entertained. His countenance was pale even to ghastliness, and his deep-set eyes glared with unnatural luster. After some inquiries respecting his health, I asked him, not knowing what better to say, if he had obtained the scarabaeus from Lieutenant G. "Oh, yes," he replied, coloring violently. I got it from him the next morning. Nothing should tempt me to part with that scarabaeus. Do you know what? Jupiter is quite right about it." "In what way?" I asked with a sad foreboding at heart. "In supposing it to be a bug of real gold." He said this with an air of profound seriousness, and I felt inexpressibly shocked. "This bug is to make my fortune," he continued with a triumphant smile, "to reinstate me in my family possessions. Is it any wonder, then, that I prize it? Since fortune has thought fit to bestow it upon me, I have only to use it properly, and I shall arrive at the gold of which it is the index. Jupiter, bring me that scarabaeus." "What? The bug, master? I'd rather not go to trouble that bug. You must get him for your own self." Hereupon Legrand rose with a grave and stately air, and brought me the beetle from a glass case in which it was enclosed. It was a beautiful scarabaeus, and at that time unknown to naturalists. Of course, a great prize in a scientific point of view. There were 2 round black spots near one extremity of the back, a long one near the other. The scales were exceedingly hard and glossy, with all the appearance of burnished gold. The weight of the insect was very remarkable, and taking all things into consideration, I could scarcely blame Jupiter for his opinion respecting it. But what to make of Legrand's coordinates with that opinion, I could not, for the life of me, tell. "My dear Legrand," I cried, interrupting him, "you are certainly unwell, and had better use some little precautions. You shall go to bed, and I will remain with you for a few days until you get over this. You are feverish, and—" "Feel my pulse," said he. I felt it, and to say the truth, found not the slightest indication of fever. "But you may be ill and yet have no fever. Allow me this once to prescribe for you. In the first place, go to bed. In the next—" "You are mistaken," he interposed. "I am as well as I can expect to be under the excitement which I suffer. If you really wish me well, you will relieve this excitement." "And how is this to be done?" "Very easily. Jupiter and myself are going upon an expedition into the hills, upon the mainland, and in this expedition we shall need the aid of some person in whom we can confide. You are the only person we can trust. Whether we succeed or fail, the excitement which you now perceive in me will be equally allayed." "I'm anxious to oblige you in any way," I replied. "But do you mean to say this infernal beetle has any connection with your expedition into the hills?" "It has." "Then, Legrand, I can become a party to no such absurd proceeding." "I am sorry, very sorry, for we shall have to try it by ourselves." "Try it by yourselves? The man is surely mad. But stay, how long do you propose to be absent?" "Probably all night. We shall start immediately and be back at all events by sunrise." "And will you promise me, upon your honor, that when this freak of yours is over, and the bug business, good God. Settled to your satisfaction, you will then remain home and follow my advice implicitly as that of your physician. Yes, I promise. Now let us be off, for we have no time to lose. That actually feels like a really good breaking point. A really good breaking point. Awesome. Again, I'm sorry for the struggle with the dialect. It's very stereotypically almost like minstrel show levels of trying to put a Southern Black person's accent into writing. And I do not feel comfortable attempting to emulate that at all. So we are not going to emulate it because I am not going to be that disrespectful. It makes me uncomfortable to see it even in writing, even though I know that it's of the times. And obviously, again, I think it should be preserved, but not in my voice. I am not the right person for that. Would be wild. Yeah, it would be awful. It would be disrespectful and no. So I'm afraid we're going to have to keep stumbling over that one until we are done with it. But that will not be tonight. We did get our quota of the E word for once. And we got through the telltale heart. Telltale. Why do I keep saying it telltale? Telltale heart. Completely understandable. I'm glad. I'm very glad. We got the E word. Woo! But it's good to see you, Bubba, and I hope you're doing well. I just have a little bit more to take care of tonight before I head to bed. And so a short stream. I have goals I want to reach by the end of the year, and making sure that my week is set up properly will help me with those. So, and that includes snacks. Snacks. All right. I do hope you all have a wonderful night. Next weekend, I'm not sure what I want to do on Sunday. I know it is the very last F1 race, and I am trying to convince my friend that we want to do like a big blowout F1 finale, since we haven't gotten to attend as many as I would have liked due to life things. But I really also have an idea for an interesting karaoke that I want to do, and I will probably elaborate more on that as we get closer. Some people know, a couple people know, but when there are more people in stream and I can be like, hey guys, I have a really cool idea. That's when I want to drop it on people to have them look forward to it. Although I could just tell you, being the special few, I want to do a duet stream, but with myself. Because I want to do harmonies and I want to do melody, and I never get to do harmony. So the plan is to record one of the parts and then sing over my own singing a second time. I think it'd be very fun. I think it'd be neat, a little different. You're special. You are. You're here. To Twyla, spicy. There's even a 3-part song that I want to hit. So yeah, I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be different. So that's the plan. Rule the world. Anyway. So yeah. Have a good night. Please look forward to it. Bye.